Okay, let's get going on primary emotions. The idea of primary emotions is a fundamental backbone of this course, built over years of clinical experience and analyzing scientific evidence. What you'll see here is evidence of four primary emotions, and that these four primary emotions relate to clinically diagnosed experiences, as well as the foundation of our client's best mental health. Part of this is recognizing and understanding that every human being has biologically based, natural, and healthy emotional responses to life, from which changes can occur both in the brain and the body, as well as in one's affective and personal experience. This will also be very important to your clients, or helping them discover that emotions are natural and biologically based, something that will help them understand there's nothing wrong with them for feeling what they do, and there's nothing wrong with their feelings, as well as how and why treatments work. Going back to discovery, something we talked about in the first lecture, that discovery is something very important that we do in mental health with the help of science also. And that is understanding that we can be biologically accurate in helping our clients understand what's going on for them, which means they're more likely to lead to psychological health or psychologically healthy. So this discovery is biologically accurate, psychologically healthy. This idea of primary emotions and actually everything about this course. So why primary emotions? Why did I focus on this? Why is it a focus of this class? Well, first of all, our primary work as clinicians is about emotions. So that is primary. Next, emotions, as I've said, emotions, and I'll say a lot in this lecture, emotions are physical feelings, biologically based and mediated by the brain and the body. Both are involved in emotions. Every emotion has a purpose, or they occur to tell us something, tell us human beings something, whatever is going on. All of which is important to understanding anxiety and depression, or responses to trauma and toxic stress. In working as a psychotherapist for decades, something that I realized like 20 years ago or something is that there really are like these four areas. These things are interrelated. They're not like these separate diagnoses. Things are really interrelated in our clients' lives. And the first is wellness, like doing well. And for, sometimes clients are going along, we help them a lot. They figure things out, they make changes, and they feel really great or feel well again. But when things aren't going well and aren't feeling well, there's just typically this combination of anxiety and depression and irritability. They really go together. And when I saw these four areas go together, I thought, well, that's really interesting. What is that all about? And that was sort of going on in my mind for a long time. And then I get to this point where I understand that this Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders from Boston University and their Unified Protocol for Transdiagnostic Disorders, they write, at their core, all of these, or depressive and anxiety disorders, arise out of a tendency to experience emotions more frequently, more intensely, and as more distressing than someone without these disorders. So again, the unified protocol and transdiagnostic means that they all go together. They're not like these separate things like we see in the DSM, like someone is anxious and that's it. Well, they might be anxious, but they might also well be depressed. And with that, they're irritable. So they all go together. And this knowledge from this particular place at Boston University was really helpful to me understand that as a clinician. Next, as we think about what's going on for us humans and what's going on for our clients, we want to understand like basically the human psyche. It's pretty simple. And when you think about it, like most things are pretty simple, but the human psyche are four things at once, or is four things. There's the cognitive, the emotional, the sensory, and the behavioral. And the emotional is in bold here because that's what we work with mostly, trying to help people with their emotions. So in common language, the human psyche is thinking and feeling and sensing and doing, all going on together, all going on at the same time. And Another way to look at this too is in this next slide, which is that it's a symphony. Like life is, I say this so much to my clients, life is not a solo act. It's a symphony. Life is a symphony of these things going on around us, inside our mind, but inside our body. But in the human psyche, it's these four things of thinking, feeling, sensing, and doing. Like for me, right this very second, I'm thinking about what I want to say to you as I go through the slide. I'm feeling a little bit nervous. I want to do this right. I'm also excited because I love talking about this stuff. Sensing, I'm sensing the chair that I'm sitting in. I'm seeing what I'm seeing, obviously. Um, but other things like I'm not really smelling anything right now. But anyway, you get the idea. I'm sensing at the same time. And then doing is behavior. Like, so I am sitting here. I am talking. I am pointing with my hand. Those are behaviors or doing. So again, the human psyche is all this stuff at once. And if you stop and think about it, you're like, oh yeah, these things are happening all together. This is important to understanding both primary emotions and what's going on for our clients. In fact, I think it would be really cool if we had one word in our language, and maybe some other languages do, that is thinking, feeling, sensing, doing. Like it is our human experience every second of our lives, but there's no one word for it. As we split it up into four words, we think they're separate, and they're not. We put it all together. That's what's going on for us. Moving again back to primary emotions and understanding what I'm talking about. So biologically, primary colors, we understand that there are primary colors that we recognize with our eyes and our brain. And this mixture of those colors over time or in the moment create different colors we have different names for. So primary colors is very similar to, is synonymous to primary emotions. The next thing to understand are primary senses. So again, the sensory system is basically five areas: seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. So those are five primary areas. We can go deeper into every one of those, but those are our primary senses, similar to primary emotions. Moving then to like psychologists and people who've studied this over time and then major contributors, I'm just going to talk about three. And the first one is Plutchik, Robert Plutchik, in The Wheel of Emotion. So I'm not going to describe this all, but he had 8, and he described how they go together and they're opposites, and they meet up and talk about different things that we're experiencing. But anyway, 8 emotions from his very instrumental and helpful work. The next person, however, is probably the most influential to understand primary emotion. His name is Paul Ekman. Him and his team over the decades have put together work, and they talk about 6 primary emotions. And they've studied around the world, and in your readings and in the work in the module, you'll see more about him and his work and his team. Basically, you want to know that like they identified 6 primary emotions, and here they are listed: angry, afraid, disgusted, surprised, happy, and sad. And for a lot of people who believe in primary emotions, those are them. But other theorists and other scientists, other people working, do not believe in primary emotions. It's something else, how they explain our emotional system. Um, but really, this is the one that has the most credibility and followings over time. But what really struck me is the University of Glasgow and the people doing work there talking about emotions. And I saw this once in an article, and it was like a aha moment. It's maybe 10 years ago. I forget exactly when I saw it, but wow, this really matches with clinical experience, I thought. So in summarizing their work, again, which you have in the module, they talk about early in the signaling dynamics, facial expressions, because they're studying facial expressions, not mental health, but expressions of emotion. These expressions systematically transmit few biologically rooted face signals, supporting the categorization of fewer elementary categories. Questioning the widely accepted notion that emotion communication is comprised of 6 basic categories like Ekman's talking about, and instead suggesting 4. And they describe them as joy, fear, anger, and sadness. And as you can see here, that surprise facial expressions were in the same facial expression as fear, and disgust and anger were the same facial expression. So I'm summarizing their work. But basically what it gets to is clinically what we're talking about, because facial expressions are obviously expressing what we're feeling. And so when I saw this, I said, oh, that really matches up with what I've seen clinically. So then, clinically speaking, again, in matching what they're talking about for facial expressions, there's joy, fear, anger, and sadness. You're going to see this slide a few times in describing what I'm talking about for primary emotions. And again, the way they concluded this in such a great way is we show that dynamic facial expressions of emotion transmit an evolving hierarchy of biologically basic to socially specific information over time. And the key part of this whole thing is biologically basic to socially specific. And again, in humans around the world, 4 biologically basic emotional expressions and then socially specific on top of that, which again, if you look at all the research, it makes a great deal of sense, but mostly for clinically, it makes unbelievably great sense. So to summarize at this moment anyway, primary emotions, that all emotions are derived from primary emotions. We have hundreds of words in the English language, actually thousands, about emotions, and they all fall into these buckets, these 4 buckets, these 4 family of emotions. We name more because of our psychosocial evolution, cultural dynamics, and language complexity, again, around the world, in our culture, in our languaging, in our understanding, in that psychosocial evolution of humans over time. But biologically basic to socially or cognitively specific, really important understanding for primary emotions. And there are, again, 4 emotional families or response systems. They are responses after all, and not one location in the brain, but interconnected, which is really important to know. Like emotions are not just in one spot. Like I talk about the amygdala and the hippocampus in this course all the time, but emotions aren't just located there. They're just major players in fear and sadness. And so we'll see this over time. But anyway, this next slide talks about how it's an intersecting or set of interacting brain regions that are involved in the psychological operations of emotional, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just one part of the brain, but like the amygdala is a big player in the fear response system, but fear isn't just located from it or happen from it alone. Another thing to really emphasize is that emotions or feelings, same thing, are experienced and they happen with the interaction of brain and body, or the brain and the chemistry interacting with the tissues in the body to create feelings. So usually when the academics are talking about emotions, they talk about um, that emotions are what's happening biologically, and feelings are our subjective experience of that. This slide talks about it, a study which I thought was great, and I haven't found many others about it. But in terms of like where people reported in the study, they felt things. So the upper line is anger, fear, the 6 that Ekman and his team talk about. And then the lower part are like the non-basic emotions. But as the slide says, the body maps show regions whose activation increased, the warm colors, or decreased cool colors when feeling each emotion. So again, the point being that the brain doesn't like cause the feeling. It causes the chemistry that interacts with the body immediately to cause the feeling. So when you feel happiness or joy, you usually feel it in the chest, and fear, same way, and sadness, sort of same way, and throughout the arms and limbs and legs and stuff. But when you talk to your clients and talk to them about this, it's like, the emotions are felt subjectively or biologically and subjectively felt, usually in the chest area. Moving then to, again, primary emotions and clinical understanding. So not surprisingly, joy and wellness are the same. Fear and anxiety are the same. Anger and irritability, that's that category and family. And then sadness and depression. So primary emotions relating to clinically what's going on for our clients and understanding that right at the outset. In these next 4 slides, I'm going to talk about like how that happens in these family of emotions. So joy, or the biological joy response, And the family of emotions, again, biologically basic to cognitively specific. So contented is a small joy response. Like, I'm contented. And then excited is a bigger joy response. Like, this is really cool. I'm pretty excited about whatever's going on. And then joyful is just happy. I'm just really happy about what's going on right now in my life. That is a bigger joy response. And then the fourth in this area, it's like ecstatic. I'm so happy. I can't take it. I can't think about anything else. It's just like I'm ecstatic in the joy response I'm having right now. So those are the four areas, like low and then higher than that, and then super high, the ecstatic. So four basically ideas, of like emotional response within the joy response family of emotions. And then these other words, not going to focus on them, but there are a whole bunch of words that relate to the joy family responses of emotions and responses. Next is fear. Same idea here. Like these areas, like to begin with concern, like I'm a little concerned about something, a little bit of a fear response, a little concern. And then there's like nervous, like I'm actually nervous about what's happening or going to happen. It's a higher, I can feel it more sort of fear response. And then there's afraid, like I am absolutely afraid right now. Like there's a snowstorm, I can't drive home. It is absolutely afraid of what I'm going to be doing, what I'm doing right now. And then there's terrified. And terrified is like, I'm in a snowstorm, I went off the road, I'm terrified. So four levels of fear. Again, this family of emotions, and then there's a whole bunch of others that we can talk about, but it's the family of emotions there. Next, moving on to anger and that family of emotions. Again, annoyed, kind of like a little bit of an anger response, not very much, but annoyed. Then there's frustrated. It's bigger. Yeah, I'm definitely, I can feel it. I'm frustrated. Got a little more of an anger response going on there. And then there's just angry. I am angry. I am ticked. I am definitely angry and I can feel it. It's my response to what's going on in life. And then there's enraged. Just so, angry you can't even think straight. No IQ, gone out the window. Just that's like enraged. So those four levels on that family of emotions for anger. And then next is, oh yeah, then these next, all these other words, for anger on this slide as well. Next, going into sadness. Again, same idea. Small amount of sadness is down, kind of blue, kind of blah, kind of down. Then the next higher is like, yeah, I'm sad. I'm definitely sad about what's going on in my life right now. And then on top of that, or like more of a sadness response is depressed. I am absolutely depressed for an hour or a day or a couple days. It's not clinical depression yet, but it's depressed. I'm definitely more than just sad. And then there's hopeless. So if a person, a human, is feeling hopeless on top of like depressed, that's where a type of clinical depression happens, is right there. Is that hopeless thought and feeling with depressed feeling, and it's like clinical depression. Then there are all these other words that mean sadness also. I'm not going to go through them individually, but that is the sadness family of emotions. Here is a movie you may have heard about, you may have seen it, called Inside Out. I think they're working on another one, or it just came out or something, but it's a great movie animation of primary emotions. I encourage you to watch that if you haven't, or with your kids or some kids, but it's a great description of primary emotions. They have 5 in it instead of 4. Longer story, but Paul Ekman is the consultant. It's a whole different thing there, but primary, great movie about that. So to primary emotions, they are all equally healthy. Again, those 4 categories, those 4 families, they're all equally healthy. You want to tell your clients that they're healthy. They're all equally important. They must happen for us to succeed and survive in our environment. They're all equally important. And then they're all equally normal. Every feeling we have, in fact, if you start using words that are in the category of sadness, like they're all just equally normal feelings. And those 4 categories are biologically based and like equally healthy, important, and normal. And really what we're coming down to here in terms of the biology of things is they're all life-sustaining. Again, we must have our sensory system and our thought system and our behavioral system. We must have an emotional system to succeed and survive in our environment through millions of years of evolution, including the Homo sapiens evolution in the last couple million years. We must have them all to succeed and survive. And that's the kind of message, of course, you can give your clients in helping them understand what's going on for them. Excuse me. And then this is an important thing, and it's like, it's hard to capture this in one slide. There's a lot to it. We'll talk more about it in the class, but these are not emotional states. A state is a mood. So if someone is down, kind of sad, depressed, and they've been that way for like a week or more, we call that a mood, or fearful or angry. It's a mood. Emotional responses are right now, what you're feeling right now based on what's going on. Um, but Emotional responses are just that, they're responses, and both to internal thoughts, like what we're thinking, what we're believing, and what's going on around us. And that combination of the two. They're emotional responses. Feelings are emotional responses. Primary emotions are emotional responses. States are mood, and they are significant clinically as well. Some key discoveries now, getting to more towards the end of this lecture, the key discoveries. Primary emotions and what's going on there helps your clients separate feelings from themselves. It is a non-judgmental acceptance of emotions. This is a big deal. A non-judgmental acceptance of emotions. This is classic CBT. Classic. And class, in fact, we'll say it again and throughout this whole course is a CBT. This is a different understanding of what's going on and a different behavioral response of what to do about them, which results in feelings and more joy feelings, less in the others. Anyway, non-judgmental acceptance of feelings. This helps your clients feel not consumed by their emotions or overrun by their emotions or controlled by their emotions. This is huge CBT as well. And many CBT programs include these things in their CBT also. And I'll talk about that in a second, in fact. But understanding primary emotions as biologically based normal responses to environment, signaling continuation or a need for change. Signaling like, wow, this is good for me. I feel a lot of joy in this. I'm going to keep this going. I'm going to keep this in my life, versus fear response. Like, oh, no, I want to change this. I got to figure out what to do here because the fear response is telling me this is not good for me. That's the biology and the psychology of our emotional responses. Next, in the next 4 slides, talking about non-judgmental acceptance. In classic CBT is emotions are something you have, they are not who or what you are. That is another example of primary emotions and understanding. In mindfulness-based stress reduction, it's the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally to the unfolding of experience moment by moment. Another great non-judgmental acceptance from a particular intervention. In DBT, or dialectical behavioral therapy, an important aspect of emotion regulation is understanding that negative emotions are not bad, or something that must be avoided. They are a normal part of life, but there are ways to acknowledge and then let go of these feelings so that one is not controlled by them. That's a great, great line from DBT. And then lastly, from the Center for Anxiety Related Disorders, the Unified Protocol, non-judgmental awareness means staying in touch with our experiences even when they are uncomfortable and accepting them as they are, letting reactions to them come and go without trying to reduce them, change them, or deem them good or bad, and without trying to run away from them. Another great line in the primary emotions help you as a clinician and help your clients get to this point, which is psychologically so much healthier for them. So again, key discoveries, clients are always feeling emotional responses. You want to help them understand that too. Their emotions are always on and always ready. Like, my joy response is always there for me. And, whether it's on or not, like I can notice it, is based on what's happening in my life. It's just like thinking. Thinking is always on, sensing is always on. Like, I'm always tasting, smelling, and hearing, and whether or not I notice it, it's how big it is in terms of how I notice it. Same with emotional responses. This is helping your clients learn to appreciate and value their painful emotional responses, no longer fearing or dreading them, because emotions you help them understand are telling your client something, just like sensory experiences. Like if I touch a hot stove, it's supposed to hurt because that protects my finger from being burned and I can't use it. So if I'm feeling a lot of threat and a lot of fear from some human in my life who's hurting me all the time, if I can go, I'm going to go because that's not good for me over time, right? So this is helping your clients learn like the emotions, what's going on. Don't fear them, don't dread them, let them tell you what's going on. This absolutely helps people eliminate fear about fear and sadness about sadness, which is the basic and the background of some of our diagnoses all by themselves. And I'll talk more about that later, of course. For the DSM-5, we have all these diagnoses. I mean, you think about it, they do fall into, a lot of them into these categories, like the anxiety disorders in the fear category, that family of emotional response. Anger, the impulsive and conduct disorders are in that category, and sadness, or the depressive disorders. There are two kinds of major depression I'm going to talk about in this course, but there's also dysthymia and disruptive mood dysregulation for children. Anyway, so the DSM actually covers these areas if you think about what it's diagnosing for us to utilize as diagnoses. So for summary discoveries, last couple slides here, this idea of primary emotions helps your clients separate feelings from themselves. That non-judgmental acceptance of emotion is what we're talking about here, especially helping your clients feel not consumed by their emotions or controlled, like, oh, I'm feeling a fear response right now. Yeah, because I'm supposed to. That makes a lot of sense. By the way, it's a big fear response. Okay, that's supposed to, like your life is on the line. It's a big fear response, as an example. Helping them understand that all emotions are biologically based, they're normal, and they're healthy, and they're life-sustaining. Those are big cognitive shifts for a person, like, oh, that's why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, because I'm supposed to. That makes sense now that I've learned all about that in myself. And which is true for all of us humans, not just that one client, but for all of us. And this means setting the stage for understanding anxiety and depression, or your client's responses to trauma and toxic stress. Again, what this class is all about also in terms of PTSD and toxic stress and interventions and anxiety and depression. This primary emotions sets the stage for all of that. I hope this has been helpful. You've enjoyed it. Next week on to our next lecture for this course.